Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Weekend Crusaders. My name's Sean Wasserkrug. With me, as always, is Brian Michaels. It's Black Friday. I'm on fumes. I haven't even started my Black Friday shift yet. I'm already on fumes. Brian, I don't think I mean, you're busy, but I don't think you get affected by Black Friday.
Not really. Not
No.
really. I did my time in retail for a good decade, and I'm free of that now.
Yeah, I'm still in my sentence, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Unless you guys all start subscribing like thousands of people to the channel, and we start getting paid, and I don't have to work retail anymore. That'd be fantastic. But nonetheless, we have 5 more movies to talk about this week. Shockingly, it's Thanksgiving, and we only have one Thanksgiving movie. And I think you and I both looked at it, we're like, are there Thanksgiving movies to talk about? And I think outside of like 3, there were none. And
I mean, there's not a whole lot of Thanksgiving movies at all to start with.
Yeah.
But then especially none of them happen to come out around this time. They must release them earlier.
Yeah, like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That's technically a Thanksgiving movie. If you want to call Die Hard a Christmas movie, Spider-Man's a Thanksgiving movie. But yeah, there's only one Thanksgiving movie we're going to be talking about on this Thanksgiving episode of the Weekend Crusaders, which is what we're going to open up the show with. Now, obviously, whether it's Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, there are specific movies for holidays that are termed holiday classics for that specific holiday. Some of them are good. Some of them are not good. Some of them are considered good because of the holidays nostalgia of it. And then there are just ones that are thrown out there as a cash grab. This one is considered a holiday classic or a Thanksgiving classic. And we're just going to go ahead and jump out. This is our revisited film. And we'll explain why it's revisited as we jump into this. But we are talking about the John Hughes film, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came out November 26, 1987, had a budget of $30 million, had a weekend opening of $7 million, and it was number 3 its opening weekend, and had a finished box office of $49.53 million. Why this is revisited, besides the fact that it's 1987, is I watched this, I want to say it was earlier this year, probably like around like February of this year, because it was for a trivia match. And it was my first time ever watching the movie. And I did not like it. Did not care for it. For many, many reasons, which we'll get into. So this was a revisited because it's like, maybe I was just in study mode and I wasn't paying attention, or I wasn't able to enjoy it because I was cramming for a match. So I revisited this mainly to see if I really just didn't like the movie in general, or if it was because I was distracted while watching it. Brian, what are your thoughts on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
This is one of those movies that every year gets brought up when people start talking about Thanksgiving movies. This is one of the first ones everybody brings up, is like, oh, this is the best Thanksgiving movie. It's the classic one. And I've always been kind of, I mean, I've never disliked the movie. I always thought it was amusing, but I never loved it the way everybody else did. So I was kind of the same way. I'm like, you know what? Let's revisit it. Maybe I'll enjoy it more, because I haven't watched it in a few years at this point. So I'm like, maybe, I'll check it out and have it and see what everybody else loves about it. Honestly, not so much. So you can go ahead and start those hate mails to us now. It's not. Now you have a stronger opinion on this than I do. I don't hate this movie. I don't think it's completely devoid of laughs. There are funny things in it, but the problem is it's one of those movies I think is partially tainted because everyone overpraises it, and it makes me kind of watch it and be like, what is everyone seeing this? I mean, it's got occasional funny scenes in that. Although this is one movie, it's got a weird tone to it because it very much feels like a PG-13 comedy, but then there's scenes where it's like, go off yelling fuck 58 times and things like that. And it's like, I'm not sure what their audience was they were going for on this movie.
I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's also just late 80s comedies where I think they really are just able to do certain things and get away with it, where in other things, like a Porky's, obviously if there's nudity, then it's 100% R. If you drop some F-bombs, we'll let it slide. Whereas like nowadays you get one F-bomb and that's it. But yeah, it's in that weird time frame where certain things were allowed to happen. They're like, oh yeah, I mean, people know that the word fuck is used a lot. We ain't gonna cause people not to go see this movie because of it. But yeah, I agree. Keep going before I go into my thing.
Oh yeah, well, that's just I don't have a lot to say about the movie. That's the problem. Is I mean, it's a John Hughes movie, so it kind of definitely has that John Hughes feel to it. It a lot of the same characters kind of pop up. We were seeing John Candy in a lot of his movies. Kevin Bacon shows up for just basically a cameo in the movie because he's worked with John Hughes a couple times. Got Edie McClurg as like in that scene I was talking about, the car play.
Yeah.
She's known as Grace, the secretary from Ferris Bueller. So it's got a lot of people that are familiar. And it's also one of those movies, which a lot of road trip movies are. It feels almost like a sketch comedy show. It's like, here's a funny scene, here's a funny scene, here's a funny scene. Let's just string them together and by the road trip. But mostly all just didn't make sense. It's one of those movies we were watching the entire time. We're thinking, there are so many other ways he could have gotten back where he needed to go. I mean, at one point he's in St. Louis, which is like 5 hours.
Yeah, you had we watched this one together. Outside of the stinker, we watched this one together. This was the biggest, and this is like one of the things where I obviously don't live in Chicago, where Brian does. So this thing was bugging Brian so much. Like normally I'm the one who's anal about timing and stuff like that. This was Brian's. Like he literally at one point goes, "Alexa, what is the distance between?" Watching this movie.
My Alexa just heard you. So, Alexa, stop.
Did I just turn her on?
You did. You turned her on.
Yes.
No, but so I don't live in Chicago. I live about an hour and a half outside of Chicago, but I'm there, at least every once in a while, and I know the geography of the area and all the suburbs and things like that. So this movie's taking place, largely. Well, he's trying to get back to Chicago, and so I know the suburb where he's supposed to live. I know where he is when he's downtown, and when he's in like St. Louis, at that point they're like 5 hours away or something. But then it's like they apparently start driving from there for like at least a few hours. And the next thing you know, they're like, oh, we're still like 4 hours away. And I'm like, where did you go? I mean, just little things like that. Or the fact that at one point he's, maybe a couple hours from home. He's like, oh, I have no way to get home now. It's like, at this point, you can call your wife to come pick you up. And it's just, there's so many different ways that it could have gone. Obviously it's to serve the story and they have to have a reason to, have this road trip. But it was just one of those things where there's just so many obvious ways that things could have been done differently. You're like, okay, come on, now you're just forcing the comedy.
Yeah, that was probably one of the more enjoyable parts of the movie, watching Brian's like brain not being able to comprehend because then the movie doesn't happen kind of thing. Which I've been there. I've actually had that argument with you before, where you're just like, well, then the movie doesn't happen. But no, it just doesn't make sense. And this movie has a lot of that. Now you could chalk it up to being an 80s comedy, and they're just like, well, we're just gonna do a comedy, blah 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 blah. Whereas like today's standards is like, no, you need to have this make sense on why they're doing this, because anyone can fix this. It's really fixable, but you can't because of XYZ. Where back then it's like, it's an 80s film, just let it go. Rewatching this, studying or not, did not change my mind on this film. I felt the exact same way I did about this film when I saw it basically 9 months ago. When it comes to comedies, all movies, but mainly comedies, you have to like the characters. Because if you don't like the characters, what's the point? And there's another movie that's a lot like this, except it's not Thanksgiving. That's the same boat, where you have two fantastic actors, in this case, John Candy and Steve Martin, but you don't like the characters that they portray. So it makes it really hard to enjoy the film, because are you enjoying the film because it's John Candy and Steve Martin, or are you enjoying the film because of the characters that they're playing? And if you can't like the characters that they're playing, then why are you going out of your way to try to like this film? And that other movie is Due Date with Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis. It's the same story, except that he's trying to get home first before his wife can have his baby. But you have these two strangers. One's a doofus in Zach Galifianakis, and the other one's the stressed out guy just trying to make it home, Robert Downey Jr. It's basically the same thing. Galifianakis is John Candy. Robert Downey Jr. is Steve Martin. Take the Thanksgiving aspect out of it. It's the same damn movie. But the bottom line is Steve Martin is us for the most part. We are just trying to get home to see our wife, who's way young. I said it was like way younger, but then I was like, no, it's just Steve Martin.
No, Steve Martin has always looked old. Yeah,
throws everything out of whack. But John Candy, you're supposed to, everyone's just like, oh, John Candy's such a likable guy. He's so, oh, you just got to like him. It's like, no, John Candy, yes. The character of Dell is inconsiderate. He's a dumbass.
Obnoxious.
What's that?
Obnoxious.
He's obnoxious and annoying as hell. And before you go, oh, he's not all the things. No, literally the whole hotel room scene shows all of these things. He's inconsiderate to the roommate and Steve Martin by trashing the bathroom. He's inconsiderate about the beer on the bed, making him sleep in his own stuff. He's a dumbass by also putting beer on a bed while it's shaking. He's a douchebag by basically doing things when Steve Martin's trying to sleep and just being obnoxiously annoying. And then he guilt trips him into basically forgiving him. And yes, does Steve Martin go off?
And seriously, he does it and then rinse and repeat. Like every time something happens, Steve Martin feels guilty and forgives him. He does something else, Steve Martin feels guilty and forgives him.
And then he just keeps building and building and building. And it's like, at one point, if Steve Martin had killed John Candy's character, I'd be like, he kind of had it coming.
But instead, you get the ultimate guilt trip of, oh, my wife's dead. Oh, now I got to forgive everything.
Exactly. Now we're best buds and come home for Thanksgiving. No, this actively, this guy almost killed you like 3 times in this movie. Granted, did you push some buttons you probably shouldn't have pushed with other people not named John, Dell in the movie? Absolutely. But it's mainly because he pushed those buttons onto you, causing your blood to boil. Does Steve Martin go a little off the handle, a little too harsh at certain points? Sure. I'm not defending Steve Martin and what he says in certain respects. But did Dell or John Candy deserve to be talked at? Hell yes. Yeah. This character is the most destructive character. And one of these movies that's supposed to be beloved. He's worse than Tommy Boy. He is worse than Chris Farley's Tommy Boy. Because with Tommy Boy, he is just a dummy, but he's actually a relatively good guy. John Candy's a salesman, and he knows how to manipulate people. We literally watch him do it in the movie where he manipulates all these people into buying shower rings as earrings because he knows how to manipulate people and pull on their strings to guilt them into paying him money for shit that's not real. He's a con man of a salesman in this movie, and he cons Steve Martin's character throughout this entire film through guilt and overly trying to be nice, but then does stuff to put him in a negative spot. He almost kills Steve Martin because the dumbass is an idiot during a ridiculous scene where he's overly dancing to a song. Granted, he's probably trying to stay awake, and I've been there. But then he like gets himself hooked and drives and just keeps driving erratically. Dude, put on the brakes. Stop the car. You're safe at that point. And then because he doesn't do that, they drive on the wrong side of the highway. I get it. It's an 80s comedy. That's the whole point of the joke. It's not a joke. It's suicidal. And then you find out that his character and how his character is by the film is like, no, he is suicidal. He's a suicidal character. And he's going to take Steve Martin down with him. And it's just, I can't enjoy a film where the characters are so unlikable. And Steve Martin's not an unlikable character. He's just put in a poorly shitty situation to the point where he's just so grinchy and grouchy that you can't actively like his character, even though we are his character. And you can't like Dell because he's literally the epitome of just the worst possible scenario you could possibly be in at any given moment. Steve Martin had his chances to get rid of him. He did, and then he just keeps getting stuck back to him. It's like having a VD and you just can't get rid of it with no matter whether you take penicillin or whatever. You just can't get rid of him. And that's John Candy in this fucking film. And it's borderline annoying.
Sean has an issue with movies about, STDs following you. So there you go.
Way to tie that back to It Follows.
Yeah, there you go.
Good job. Good job, Brian. But no, I don't understand the love of this film. There's I think I told you there's only one scene in this movie that I actively laughed at. And it's after John Martin. I just made them one person. After John Candy almost kills them in the car and they're outside on the highway and he finds out about his wallet and stuff like that. And he starts shaking them. All that. Like, that's the only part to me that's funny in this movie. Everything else is cringy That whole hotel scene, I was telling you this as we were watching, like, this is the cringiest scene I've watched in an incredibly long time. And I even made the defense. People will say, well, how do you like The Office? How do you like Parks and Rec or Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which are cringe shows? You know why I like those ones? Because they're done well and the actors are good and the writing's good. Everyone puts John Hughes on this fucking pedestal, like Christopher Nolan and Tarantino and all this shit. Go back and watch John Hughes movies. 50% of those movies are not good.
I agree with you because I mean, obviously, I come from kind of that John Hughes era, but there are certain John Hughes movies that I love, and then there's a lot of mediocre ones. I don't know if there's any of his that I actively like hate or dislike. But like Planes, Trains, Automobiles and Curly Sue and Pretty in Pink and something, they're really just kind of lower tier. Where just kind of like, they're fine for me. I mean, like I said, there's some parts in here I find funny, but I just don't get it.
It's not a good movie. It's not, and I'm tired of people going like, if you don't think Trains, Trains, and Automobiles is funny, then there's something wrong with you. You know what? Same people say that shit about Napoleon Dynamite. Doesn't make it fucking funnier. If anything, it makes me think you're more sad as a person. It's not, and I don't want to put Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in the same spot as Napoleon Dynamite because this movie is still leaps and bounds 1,000 times better than Napoleon Dynamite, and Brian will agree with me on that. But it's not a classic. It's a horror film. It is a horror film for Steve Martin. And luckily, and I said this was weird, when he gets home, his wife acts like he's been missing for like 3 months.
And it's been, we figured 3 days, 2 days.
2 days. 2 days.
Yeah.
She acts like she hasn't seen him in 6 months and he was a hostage somewhere. Because when she's coming down the stairs, she's got tears down her eyes. And she hugs him like she didn't know she was ever going to see him again. It was like, what is going on? Now, granted, if she knew what Steve Martin had gone through in that story, I could understand that. But that's maybe the audience going, oh my God, thank God he made it home safe. But her acting that compassionate and like worried makes no sense based off of the character that we're seeing from the film. It just, I don't get it. I don't get why people love this movie. I love Steve Martin. And if anyone who hasn't seen it, Only Murders in the Building is phenomenal on Hulu. Check that out. It's probably one of the best Steve Martin performances I've ever seen. I love John Candy. I don't understand why people think this movie's funny. It's not. It's cringy to the upteenth degree. And I just don't understand it. Don't understand it. Anything else you want to put?
No, although I will say this is the only movie this week that is not free anywhere to watch, which is odd because it's Thanksgiving.
Exactly. You would think they'd pop on like anything just right there.
We were on a streak because like, wait, all the movies this week are available somewhere for the first time ever. They're like, oh, wait, no, here's one.
Except for the one that should be the most available out of every one of them.
Right.
We're going to move on now to my pick, which I'm shocked that this movie isn't based in Thanksgiving because I don't know. I feel like it has a Thanksgiving-esque vibe to it, but it's in San Francisco and it's in the summer. So clearly it's not. But we're talking about a film that I love, that I know Brian's not. I don't think Brian actually hates the movie. I think Brian's kind of in the same boat where I am with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where I don't think he gets why it's so beloved. But for me, this is one of my favorite performances of this actor. I love this movie. I watched this movie a ton when I was a kid. We were talking about the Robin Williams comedy, Mrs. Doubtfire. Mrs. Doubtfire came out November 26, 1993, had a budget of $25 million, had a weekend opening of $20.46 million. It was number one its opening weekend and spent a total of 5 weeks at number one, just not consecutively, and had a finished box office of $441.28 million, $219.19 million domestic, and $222.09 million international. Robin Williams. I think we almost had 2 Robin Williams movies this week, but we ended up swapping stuff out. Didn't we almost have? I think the original stinker. Yeah, Old Dogs. We were going to do Old Dogs.
Oh, that's right.
So we almost had 2 Robin Williams movies in here.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, he's in that.
Okay.
Yeah. But we decided we didn't want to watch Old Dogs. So we chose a different stinker. But Robin Williams. Everyone loves Robin. I have not seen anyone who actively dislikes that man because he's great at what he does. Does he overact? Hell yeah. But that's also part of his charm, is his overacting. Mrs. Doubtfire, to me, outside of like Aladdin as the genie, to me is the cusp of Robin Williams' brilliance in comedy, but also has that heart in the character that he's playing, which is wow, I'm blanking on his actual character name, Daniel. Daniel, yeah, he's right. He's basically Robin Williams. I wouldn't say he's Robin Williams is really putting on a performance of this one, but I think he's basically being Robin Williams in this movie. He loves his kids, but he loves to have fun, and he loves to be the cool dad, the fun dad, and all that stuff, which puts obviously immense pressure on Sally Field's character to kind of have to be the disciplinary of the family until eventually, snaps and they get a divorce. I do think that obviously because it's 1993 and you have to have the plot going for it, I do think the judge's like initial sentencing of the divorce was a little rough for for what like nothing's wrong to like basically punish the Daniel character this way, but so he's forced into becoming Mrs. Doubtfire. But I love this movie. I love Robin Williams' performance as Daniel and as Mrs. Doubtfire. Sally Field's character's okay in the film. Like she doesn't put on a great Sally Field performance in my personal opinion. The kids, you got Matthew Lawrence. You've got oh god, what's her name from Matilda? Blanking on her name. Mara Wilson.
Yeah, that's right.
Mara Wilson. They also got Lisa Jacob as the older sister. I think they all do their jobs pretty well. Pierce Brosnan. I think it's the first movie I ever saw Pierce Brosnan in when I was a kid. I knew him as this before James Bond.
This is before Bond.
Yeah, it was before Bond, but this was like, oh, the guy from Mrs. Doubtfire is Bond. Like that's where my brain went. I think he does a great job because he's not playing that typecast new boyfriend role where he's actually he's a bad guy and he's kind of like manipulating the mom. He's actually, for the most part, I think a generally good guy in this film. There's never a part of this film where it's like, oh, he's got ulterior motives and all this kind of stuff. He's basically a good guy. It's just because he's replacing Robin Williams, you're not supposed to like him. But when you watch the movie, it's like, the dude's actually a good dude. He's not doing anything wrong. But the comedy of Robin Williams flipping back and forth between these two characters of Daniel and Mrs. Doubtfire and the antics and stuff like that. The scene with him and his brother and his lover, I think, is great and funny, and it lets Robin Williams be Robin Williams in that scene. I really, really enjoyed this film. I feel like I'm going all over the place, so I'm going to go to Brian now. Brian, Mrs. Doubtfire.
I mean, for Mrs. Doubtfire for me was basically another revisited film because I have not watched this film in forever. And I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it now because I mean, when I first saw it, I remember liking it. I remember thinking it was funny. It was Robin Williams kind of in his prime at the time. But I think that's kind of part of the problem. Going back and watching it now, I mean, Sean kind of already hit it on the head. Is that I don't hate this movie, but I don't understand the huge appeal of it because I mean, Robin Williams in this movie is just kind of doing Robin Williams, and it's a shtick that even at the time was already starting to get tired for me because I mean, it's he's doing all his running all over the place and all his voices and things like that, but it's all the exact and a lot of them the same voices, things that he'd done already in his stand-up. He'd done them in Aladdin. He'd done before that, even Good Morning Vietnam. And now he's doing it again here. And it's just kind of like when he's doing all his voices and stuff, it's just kind of his usual shtick. And I mean, eventually he, settles on this one character, Mrs. Doubtfire. But then my problem with that is that there has to be a level of believability in these movies. And the problem is anybody, especially his family members who have lived with him their whole lives, would have identified him in a heartbeat. I mean, from the eyes, even his voice is not that different than voices he's used with his children in previous scenes. I mean, any one of them standing face to face with him, looking at his eyes, looking at his mouth, hearing him talk, and be like, that's Dad in makeup.
He's wearing a plastered mask. It's not like his makeup.
But you can tell it's a plastic mask with makeup.
That's because for the audience at home, they have to know that it's still Robin Williams.
Or even like Robin Williams calls up Sally Field and several several phone calls in a row, like for names, doing these different voices that all sound like Robin Williams doing voices, which she's lived with him his whole life and heard him doing all these voices. She knows his voice.
Yeah, that is the one thing too. Like, she's probably heard all these voices before.
Exactly. I mean, part of it's just kind of the believability of it there. And then I mean, later on, like when he's doing like the restaurant scene where he's like, changing makeup on and off, back and forth, like that is like 5 hour in a makeup chair makeup, and he's putting it on and off in 5 minutes at a time.
Well, I mean, he does the same thing when the social worker shows up, and he's having back and forth. It's like, I don't even me now. It's like there's no way he could do that.
Yeah, and again, we're at this point, we're grown up. We're overanalyzing more than we were at the time. But it again, I don't hate the movie. I think it's amusing, mildly amusing. But for me, it's just Robin Williams has done this same kind of thing in other movies, and he's done it better. Um, just a couple random observations. The music in the movie, way too on the nose. You got songs like "Dude Looks Like a Lady" and "Walk Like a Man." Like, okay, we get it. This guy dressed up as a woman. You actually took one thing I was going to say. Pierce Brosnan. I love the way they portrayed Pierce Brosnan in this movie because he's not, the evil ex who, he's actually a jerk, and the wife just doesn't know it yet, but he's going to expose him. It's not. He's a good guy. I mean, end of the movie. I don't think we see him at the end of the movie, but the presumption is he's still with her.
Yeah, we never after
Right.
the reveal that
Right.
that Daniel is Doubtfire, we don't see him the rest of the way.
Right, but we
don't
know
know
that
if really
Daniel and his wife do not get back together.
Yeah.
So and I like that. I was afraid they would go with that anyway when I originally saw it, but they didn't. They said, there's gonna, be co-parents, but it's not like they're gonna get back together and just push this guy to the side, because Pierce Brosnan is a good character, and I kind of like that about him as well. Because even when he's first, when Daniel first starts overhearing him talk about like
at the pool,
he's talking about how much he likes these kids and how much he wants to be a part of these kids' lives. It's not like, oh, these stupid kids, I hate kids, and I like the way they approach that. So that was good.
Like literally the only reason why Daniel retaliates is because he got called a loser.
Yeah.
which Daniel had never met, or Pierce Brosnan's character had never met Daniel at that point. But still, I mean, that's why. Which, first off, had he hit him with that kind of velocity, with that pair? Was it a pair? Brosnan would have went down. Like he hit him with that looked like an 80+ mile an hour fastball to the back of the skull. Brosnan would not have stayed up.
Like, oh, it's a drive-by fruity. And I'm like, oh, this isn't funny. This is not funny.
It's funny to me, but even then, it was like that. And I'm glad that like even afterwards, Pierce Brosnan went. I'm like, yes, you have to sell it. That fucking hurt, dude. Like, don't walk it off like that was no those things that you would be on the ground when that happened.
Yeah, and then my only other thing is toward the end of the movie. First of all, the mom and the kids are both talking about, oh, it was so much happier when she was around. It's like, at this point, it's him. Why are you still calling it she? You're still referring to Mrs. Doubtfire as she instead of when he was here. That bugged me. And then the whole end with him getting the TV show. It's like, first of all, his character, Mrs. Doubtfire, and what he was doing when hosting this TV show. No kid's gonna want to watch that. That was a crappy show. I mean, it was not entertaining, and no kid would want to watch it. Plus the fact that being 1993, I'm pretty sure no families are going to go for, hey, there's this transvestite hosting my show.
But I don't think, but that's the thing though, is do you really think this educational network really would have came out and said that this is a man being a woman? Or they would have just kept the persona that Mrs. Doubtfire is a real character?
Or risk being exposed if they do. I mean, who knows?
It's 1993. I don't think they ever came. I personally don't think they come out and say that Mrs. Doubtfire.
That's why that was the last thing I mentioned, because there's a little offhand nitpick. But I mean, like I said, it's amusing. It's something I wanted to revisit, and I watched it again. I don't regret it, but I'm probably not going to watch it again, maybe ever.
It had been probably at least a good decade since I've seen Mrs. Doubtfire, but I still enjoyed it. I still think the boobs getting lit on fire and the dunking his face in the cake and all that stuff still worked for me. I mean, granted I wasn't like losing my shit, but it was like a nostalgia hug for me watching this. Like, I remember as a kid loving this, and I remember him, doing the whole like the dinosaur Elvis thing, like with the toys and like stuff. Like, it just made me miss Robin Williams.
I will agree with that. Just anytime I watch some with him in it, I do miss it. And that's the thing about this movie as well. I think this was kind of, you touched on it. This was kind of towards the end of his, main focus on comedy. It's like from here, he kind of went into where he's doing comedies and dramas in a balance. Well, and by the time he hit like 2000, it was almost exclusively dramas after that.
Well, after this, he did like Jack and Flubber and all this stuff. And like, I don't think Flubber was any good, but Jack I thought was good. But Jack's also very, kind of tugging on the heartstrings intentionally kind of thing. But I think this was kind of the peak of his blockbuster success. Yeah. And then after this, like, Flubber was a Disney film. So
he had like mid-range comedies, and then he started focusing on a lot of dramatic roles too.
Exactly. Like, I think Doubtfire was his peak. And how you were saying, they're like, oh, he's just doing the same shtick we've seen from this, and this. Me as an 8-year-old, I never saw those things. So this is outside of the Genie. this was my first introduction to live action Robin Williams. Because outside of that, I think the only thing I knew him from at that age was Toys. Which
I grew up on Mork and Mindy, so it tells you that.
but I said we're not the same age. I didn't see Good Morning Vietnam till this year for the show, and then I didn't see any of his stand up, back then. Definitely I didn't. So for me, I had Genie, I had Toys, which is not a kid's film, and this. So for me, this shtick was new. This wasn't rehashed or redone over and over again like it was for you at that time. And I think that's why it maybe is more, it hits more for me than it does for you, because it's no different than.
Well, and even so, that's what I was talking about. As a revisit, I kind of feel that way. At the time, I think I didn't even feel like I was in Robin Williams' Burnout at the time. But now, having seen him do that same thing several more times in later films, you go back now and you're like, okay, it's just Robin doing Robin.
Yeah,
but at the time, I wasn't even burned out about it back then. So
I think this is the same spiel as like us now watching, like, I don't want to say his name, but I'm just going to say Will Ferrell compared to someone younger, where it's like, oh man, Will Ferrell's so funny. That I was like, he's basically doing the same thing we see him do.
Well, there's so many people. I mean, not on the same level as Robin.
No, I'm just saying. I'm trying to
but when you talk about Adam Sandler and people like that, you're like, they're basically doing kind of the same shtick over and over. But
which for younger people, though, they maybe not have seen all those older films. Yeah. Where we've seen the whole rise of Will Ferrell, whereas for you, you've seen the rise of Robin Williams. I hadn't. So it was fresh for me where it wasn't necessarily for you at that time. Yeah. And I think if I go back and I think of Robin Williams movies, the first movies that pop in my head is Mrs. Doubtfire and Aladdin. And then for some reason, probably Jack. Those are the first three movies that pop in my head when I think of Robin Williams. Whereas for you, it's probably like Good Morning Vietnam and other ones. And it's not Mrs. Doubtfire or maybe even Aladdin. Because, like you said, Mork and Mindy and probably Dead Poets Society and all these other ones all of his dramas that I didn't see or haven't seen still, kind of thing. So a lot of it, I think, just kind of depends on how old you were and how much you knew of Robin Williams before this happened on how well you'll enjoy this film overall. But yeah, Miss Doubtfire is on.
It's on Disney Plus and Amazon Prime right now.
Exactly. So now we're going to go to our stinker. Like I said, we were going to do Old Dogs, but we got to the time to watch it. And I was like, I really don't want to watch this movie. And you're like, I don't either. Let's pick something else. So we picked something.
Well, also part of the fact was that we couldn't fit it for free. I'm like, I'm not paying for it.
That was another thing. I was like, I don't want to, neither one of us wanted to pay to watch the stinker.
So I'm like, there's some more stinkers we can choose from. Yeah.
And boy, did we pick one. This was a movie that this is a lot like with like Double Team and Simon Says, where it's like, I know I sat down and watched this, but I don't remember anything from this film. To the point where it feels like watching it for the first time. And granted, when I was younger, I watched this guy every day. I was not supposed to, but when the parents are at work and you come home from school and you have power of the remote, you go to this guy's show and you watch him and you learn about things you probably were way too young to be learning about. As Brian throws something on
my microphone, sorry.
But we are talking about his own film, basically. Like in terms of like, this is kind of around the same time when Howard Stern did like
Private Parts,
and that wasn't good.
That was a few years ago.
No, we're not talking about Private Parts, but we are talking about the Jerry Springer film, Ringmaster. Ringmaster came out November 27th, 1998, had a budget of $20 million, had a weekend opening of $3.34 million. It was number 10 its opening weekend, and had a finished box office of $9.25 million. I mean, who here didn't watch Jerry Springer? I mean, it was, I wouldn't say it was a requirement, but you go channel surfing one day. For anyone who doesn't know what channel surfing is, when you were younger, you had a remote. You just kept hitting the up channel and just kept going until you found something. And more times than not, you would land on Jerry Springer and you pause real quick on what crazy shit's happening today. And then you would just get sucked into this. This was reality TV before reality TV became reality TV, because you would watch this, you're just like, oh my God, there are people like this out in the world. This is fucking crazy. There are people attacking each other like it's pro wrestling on a stage in front of people. This is, and then you found out that it was just as scripted as reality TV and pro wrestling. But it's, as a kid or even as teenage, whatever, this was back in the early 90s, reality TV. You watched to watch the train wrecks. You watched this to see the crazy ass people that would pop up on these shows and watch basically Jerry Springer be the puppet master for this whole thing. Now, personally, I'm more of a Steve Wilkos fan who was a security guy on Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
I personally like Steve Wilkos because Steve Wilkos will actually like get in the mix with the character with the
Surprised he wasn't in
cast.
this movie, actually. Yeah.
What's that?
Surprised they didn't let him be in this movie.
Exactly, because Steve Wilkos would fuck a person up on stage. He didn't care if he was the host or not.
This is while the show was still on, right? This
I
movie
think
came out?
this show's still on. I think I watched it for like 6 months, and I was like, okay, I'm tired of watching this crazy ass stuff. But I really liked Steve Wilkos. But we're talking about Jerry Springer. So he makes a movie, granted, basically about the Jerry Springer show, but he doesn't have the rights to Jerry Springer. So it's just the Jerry Show. And he's called, is it Jerry Fleming?
Jerry Farrelly is his name.
Fairly.
But yeah, there's even I think you stepped out real quick as soon as it ended, but there's actually a disclaimer at the end basically saying this has nothing to do with Jerry Springer show, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and it was just like, I don't know why that was the situation, but it's just like, we all know it's Jerry Springer.
Oh,
like,
clearly, yeah.
We all know. But it was like, that's the first thing I noticed. Like, as soon as he went to a show, it just said Jerry. And I was like, that's not the way. That's not how the.
But the weirdest thing is there's even a part in the movie where you refer to the Jerry Springer show because they're talking about different talk shows, like, oh, and on Oprah and I don't remember what else they're doing, Oprah and whatever, and Jerry Springer. I'm like, but you're Jerry Springer.
Exactly. So it was weird that we were kind of like in this little pocket universe kind of thing where he's Jerry Springer, but he's not Jerry Springer. Yeah. But I mean, it's basically about the Jerry Springer show. It's his show. He's got this cast of crazy people and he's putting them on the show. It's basically Jerry Springer, but it's not supposed to be Jerry Springer. But you got Jamie Presley, you got Michael Jai White. Oh God, what was the mother's name? I'm blanking on her name.
Molly Hagan is her name. She's one of those actors you've probably seen and stuff, but nobody knows her. You won't recognize her name. But.
Yeah, you got William McNamara. This movie's not good. It's really not good. It's right up there to me with like, of course, with like late 90s comedies with like Chairman of the Board, Freddy Got Fingered, where it's like you have one central person that you're paying attention to, aka like with those was Tom Green and Carrot Top, and then you just cast these people around him who suck. And Jamie Presley's not bad personally, but she's playing a type in this film. And Michael Jai White,
she played a lot as like the white trash, like from everything from My Name Is Earl to several other movies.
She got typecast like that for a while with Joe Dirt and yeah, My Name Is Earl and all that kind of stuff. And you're watching it and it's not funny at all. And it's like, clearly they're trying for this to be a comedy, but there's no actual funny moments. And I actually link this more to another movie that I despise, which is Drop Dead Gorgeous, where it's about a bunch of people in like, this, beauty queen pageant. They're all just a bunch of fucking idiots. But this is based on the Jerry Springer show without it calling it Jerry Springer show. You got basically these two main characters in Jamie Presley and Molly, is it Hagan? Mm-hmm. Who are mother and daughter who
we weren't sure when it started.
Yeah, because they look more like
roommates, sisters, friends. Wait, mother, daughter? Okay.
Which we checked the ages, it actually lines up, but they just don't look like mother and daughter. And they basically are, Jamie Presley is the daughter of Molly Hagan, and she's basically sleeping with Molly Hagan's husband, played by William McNamara. And then she has a fiance who the mother sleeps with. It's like a big foursome kind of thing. And then they actively together call and get on the Jerry Springer show, and then they're excited about it. So it was like, okay, is this how the real world really is with Jerry Springer? Which it is.
I guarantee you, people like that would actually love to be on Jerry Springer and tell their stories.
And then you've got another side story with Michael Jai White and his girl, and he keeps sleeping with all her friends and all this kind of stuff. And then it's all about them going to LA to be on the Jerry Springer show, the Jerry Farley show. And we're watching it and we're like, okay, is there an actual plot to this? Or is it just these characters going on the show? And no, that's the movie. It's just them going on this show. And I'll stop and I'll wait until I come back. Brian, you hop in now with
Yeah.
Ringmaster.
I mean, it basically, the movie is basically behind the scenes of the Jerry Springer Show. Is essentially what this movie is. It's basically like, well, we want to appeal to our Jerry Springer audience, but here it can be R-rated and we can show boobs and we can swear, and that's basically, I think, the pitch.
Yeah.
The pitch meeting went. Um, I didn't hate this movie. I'm not going to call it good. I still gave it a fairly low rating on my Letterboxd, but
You gave this higher than movies that are actively good. He was pissing me off after the movie because he's like, I'm gonna give this many stars. He goes, it shockingly has a better rating than like The Man Who Knew Too Little and all this. I'm like, are you effing kidding me?
better than American Tail, better than Rockadoodle. Anyway, so I think it's one of those things. I think you have to go into this with the mindset of watching it with the same mindset you watched the actual Jerry Springer Show. It's like, this is complete shit. It's bad acting. It's scripted. It's just going for shock value and outlandish weird relationships with my brother is my dad and my transvestite wife is it's that's why you watch the Jerry Springer Show. It's what kind of outlandish shit they could come up with. And so you kind of go in this movie with the same approach, where you're just like, okay, this is just going to be ridiculously stupid and bad scripting, but it's the train wreck kind of thing you watch. And I won't say that there's not many scenes that I found hilariously funny or anything like that, but it was amusing. Probably for all the wrong reasons. Because I mean, you're not watching it thinking, oh, these jokes are funny. You're just watching it thinking, okay, this guy. It's almost one of those so bad it's good movies. But I don't want to say it's good because it's not.
It's so not.
But I mean, part of it is just laughing at the the kind of lowest common denominator of American society, are the kind of people that would go on this show, would be excited about going on and putting on this act, all these things in their families and these dysfunctional people. But I've seen worse. I mean, it's not good, but I've seen far worse, actually.
In terms of us watching it together, we've watched worse, but I think it's hands down one of the worst films we've watched. But I think you and I watching it together made it not feel as awful. But watching it by yourself, no, this movie's fucking.
Oh yeah, if I just went to a movie theater by myself and watched it at home by myself, I would mostly be bored by it. But it's the kind of thing you get some buddies and get some beers or whatever you like to drink and watch it, make fun of it, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is the epitome of a Mystery Science 3000 film.
Yeah.
You watch it with somebody, you attack, you verbally basically bash it as it's going on, and it's an enjoyable film that way. You watch it as like, what are we going to the movies Friday night? Let's watch Ringmaster. And you go to, you're like, what the fuck did I just spend my money on? And it's a really bad film. To the hokey soundtrack that they have playing throughout it, and to the like you're expecting
this movie is very much a product of its time, from the fashion to the music to everything.
Well, the funny thing is too, is like as you're going through the movie, you think at some point Jerry's gonna break, because he looks like he's just not about the show anymore. He looks like he's over the craziness, and he's
that's just the fact he's not an actor and can't look interesting.
Well, because there's parts where he's just like you think like he's gonna eventually snap. But no, you're right. He's just not a very good actor. And then at the end of the film, he gets his Oscar moment where he literally goes after a fan who's attacking the I almost said the contestants, and they're so not contestants, but the guests on the show. And he starts just going, "This is America," and blah blah blah. And we're both watching like, and the Oscar goes to Jerry Springer. But it's so like and here's the main thing with the film that as we were watching it, yes, everyone's bad in this film. There's no characters that are like dubbed, like, oh man, I really like this character. They're all horrible. But the problem is that Michael Jai White's arc, him and his girlfriend and their friends, you could have removed them from this movie and the movie is still the same movie. They really serve no purpose in this film except for Michael Jai White hooking up with Jimmy Presley and almost hooking up with Molly Hagan. The girls in the movie, they're really just there to be antagonists that amount to really nothing because they end up not going on the show. So like as you're watching this film, we keep jumping over to their characters and their story, and it doesn't matter. They're just waste of time, on the movie. And so it's like you could have been building. I know I'm saying this about a Jerry Springer movie. You could have been building these characters a little better, stuff like that. Like maybe like the fiance who's kind of played like a dope. You could have maybe built him up a little bit, or
it was action star Michael Dudikoff, by the way.
Yeah, or you could have been building up William McNamara's character a little bit tighter. Instead, we're wasting time with these girls who really bring nothing to the film except for horrendously bad acting. And by the end of the film, you're like, so what the fuck was the point of their characters?
Well, I honestly think that's the thing is if you look at this as a narrative movie, you're going to just be like, this is nothing. What's the point? If you look at this as essentially what it was, it's like, okay, it's a fictionalized, here's behind the scenes of a Jerry Springer show, and we can swear and show boobs. That's what this movie was intended to be, and that's what they gave you.
Or they could have given more time to Jerry.
The kind of audience that's really into Jerry Springer probably really liked this. So.
Yeah, as I say, you could have given more time to Jerry, but like we said, Jerry's not a good actor. But you could have. There's so much more, like you said, narrative they could have added to the film to at least either make it tighter or make the story more connected. But they wasted it on this side plot storyline that literally amounted to nothing in the film. But ultimately, by the end of the movie, it's Jamie Presley and Molly Hagan are the main characters of this film. It's not Jerry Springer. He's the, I don't want to say he's the MacGuffin, but he's what they're striving to. They're striving to get on the show to meet him. He's there, they're on the show. But granted, they're the two main characters of the film, and there is potential there for a decent story between their characters with the arc. They're just not. It's just not written well. It's not acted well. Time is kind of given to them, but then they do stuff so outlandishly stupid that you're just like, oh, any momentum you had for us to feel something for you, you just lost it. And then the movie just ends with them potentially getting ready to redo the same thing they just got done doing with the new neighbor. And then the credits roll, and you're just like, so that was a movie. And that was Ringmaster in a nutshell. It was just a weird, like bottle movie of the Jerry Springer show. And after you're done, it didn't make me want to let's look up Jerry Springer shit. No, you're just like, man, I'm glad Jerry Springer's not really much of a thing anymore.
Right. Because you're right. I mean, guys, at the time, it was pretty much on TV 24/7 somewhere or another.
You couldn't turn to WGN or UPN or whatever the channel
was somewhere at any time
and not find Jerry Springer on TV. Now it's like, doesn't he do a judge show? I think he's like
I have no idea at this point. I don't care to find out.
Which is kind of like, really? But anyway, Ringmaster is on, was it Prime?
Well, like most of our stinkers, it's the most available movie. It's on Prime if you have it. If your library uses Hoopla, it's on there. Or you can watch it free with ads on Vudu, on Tubi TV, or on Plex.
Isn't that how it always goes? The stinker film is always the most available.
Yeah.
We're now moving on to our featured film. This is a film that I feel like, for the most part, is beloved by everyone that's seen it. I think a lot of people have kind of, even over the last couple of years, have brought a torch for this film because everyone keeps talking about, oh, Frozen's the best Disney film in the 2010s. And everyone goes, motherfuckers, did you forget about this movie? And so they've all been carrying a torch for this film. We're talking about the 2010 Disney film Tangled. Tangled came out November 26, 2010, had a budget of $260 million. Wow, for an animated film.
I can explain that in a minute.
Oh yeah, it had a weekend opening of $48.76 million. Number 2, its opening weekend spent 1 week at the number 1 spot. It had a finished box office of $592.46 million, 208.82 million domestic, and 391.64 million international. Explain. $260 million for an animated film?
That is not really the budget for this movie. Basically, the problem is this movie started out being planned as a regular 2D animated movie, and then they started experimenting with what they call it's like a hybrid 2D 3D kind of thing they were going to make it into, and then eventually it turned into a completely 3D movie. The problem is that all the research and everything they put into basically creating Disney's first 3D animated movie, because at the time Pixar was essentially its own entity still, even though Disney owned them. They basically all the research and production and starting up a new studio, essentially, that got lumped in as the Tangled budget because this is the first movie they produced. So, I mean, honestly, it probably still cost over $100 million, but that's an inflated number due to the fact they essentially started a studio and kind of made the movie twice. I mean, it wasn't completed in 2D, but it started out as 2D. So,
Gotcha. Well, they made their money back at least.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Tangled obviously is the story of Rapunzel. They cast Mandy Moore as Rapunzel in the film. Of course, they
I thought you were about to ask what her name was. Cassidy Moore as what's her name again?
for a second there, I was like, what was her name? I was like, oh, it's fucking Rapunzel. Shut up. I could have gone through that and you wouldn't have had to call me out. No one would have been the wiser. But no, you had to go, you forgot Rapunzel, didn't you? Dick. They cast my boy Zachary Levi as Flynn Rider, which I was incredibly happy with because obviously, I've said on the show many times I love the show Chuck. So it was nice to see him in a big feature film. Obviously, this was before Shazam, and now he's about to play Kurt Warner in like American Underdog and stuff like that. But this film, and I think the reason why this film works so well is you've got a very solid voice cast. You got Donna Murphy as Mother Gothel.
Mother Gothel.
You got Ron Perlman, Jeffrey Tambor, MC Gainey, Brad Garrett, which MC Gainey was a ringmaster also. It's a very, very solid cast. The music's good. I don't think necessarily the music is super memorable or catchy like Frozen or some other of the Disney classics, but I think it's solid throughout the music. And for me, the biggest staple point of any Disney animated film is you've got two beloved animal characters with Maximus the horse and what's his name? Pascal, which I love Pascal. To me, that's one of the big scale points on whether or not a animated Disney film is going to work is if it is an animal cast in it, are they likable? Are they enjoyable? And both Maximus and Pascal are awesome. What are your thoughts on Tangled?
So yeah, well, Tangled, like I said, I was kind of following this when it was coming out because I enjoy Disney movies and I kind of knew that this was one of the ones that was coming out. And what I hated about it, I don't want to say hated about it. The one thing I had against it when it first came out is for the longest time it was just Rapunzel, and then all of a sudden they decided to change the title to Tangled, and essentially that was because Disney figured boys don't want to go see a movie that's like about this girl, about Rapunzel, which is the same reason that Frozen, originally called the Snow Queen, was changed to Frozen, and all these other ones now have these like vague titles because they don't want to just call it some princess in the title because they don't want to name it that. So I was like, I had this thing like, I hate that they're changing these names just because of marketing for, demographics or whatever. But, I love the voice cast. I especially love they put somebody like, Mandy Moore and Zachary Levi, who are known people, but they are not gigantic superstars. To have them voice the leads, I think that they're great in here. I think the music is phenomenal. I think as Disney's first 3D animated movie, I think it looks phenomenal. I mean, if you look at it now, you can see...
It looks gorgeous.
You look at it now, and I mean, you see a few things that they've definitely improved over the years. But as it is, I mean, for a first attempt, it's beautiful. It's extremely well done. Especially if you watch it, on a nice 4K TV or something these days, it looks great. The rest of the cast is great. I know, like one of the ones I really liked actually personally was Mother Gothel, who Donna Murphy. She's mainly character actor in movies, but she's done a ton of like stage work. She has like Tony Awards, several more nominations, stuff like that. So I know her from some of that stuff. But yeah, it's got a great supporting cast again of not superstars, but people Ron Perlman, Brad Garrett, Jeffrey Tambor, these people, and it just works. And I think the story is great. I love the characters, like you said, the animals are awesome. But yeah, I mean, there's like not a whole lot specifically I have to say about this movie because it's just. I love it pretty much beginning to end. I don't think of anything I have any complaints about. I definitely agree that it is superior to Frozen. I enjoy Frozen, but this is definitely better than Frozen.
Oh yeah, I don't hate Frozen by any means. I don't think Frozen deserves all the accolades because I think the movie as a whole, when you think of Frozen, you think of the songs, which granted, the songs in Frozen are superior to Tangled, in my opinion. But do you think about the story of Frozen? No, not really. You think about the songs. Whereas with Tangled, I think about the story, not the songs. And to me, story always outweighs songs. And the journey for Rapunzel, which granted, I'm in the same boat. Would I have been excited to see a movie called Rapunzel? No. I saw the preview for Tangled, and what hooked me was that, hey, Mandy Moore. I like Mandy Moore. Hey, Zachary Levi's my boy. Okay, I got to see what they're doing. and their characters work. Rapunzel is, an awesome character, and I think Mandy Moore does the voice and obviously the singing very, very well. Zachary Levi. How can you not like Zachary Levi? And him playing Flynn Rider. I love the Flynn Rider character, or Eugene, however the hell you say his last name in the movie. He's kind of a Ryan Reynolds type. Where he's not dropping the damn mic.
My hands full the rest of the show.
Not fidgeting. But it's his character is funny because he's one of those kind of, like I said, like an aloof character who just gets lucky in the stuff that he does, but he's overly confident, overly cocky. But he kind of, what's that? What'd you say?
Smolder.
Yeah, the smolder. Or even the part where he gets knocked out and he gets stuffed in the closet and he just falls flat and then just like levels out. Like, it's just like little things like that. And then how Pascal keeps waking him up with the tongue. So like, and then his feud with Maximus. It's stuff like that.
That is what I think makes great animal characters. You can have cutesy animal characters. Every movie tries to put in, whether it's Disney or Illumination or whoever it is, they put in these cutesy animal characters, but sometimes that's all they are. In this one, Maximus is essentially a whole character. He has a whole thing with Flynn. He just happens to be a horse.
Yeah, he has a whole story arc. Yeah. He's never lost a man. He's always caught a man. And he's got a rider, but the rider is not important. It is the horse. He is the guy, and he's gonna make sure that he captures Flynn. And then I love that character. And then Pascal, he's basically the Sebastian Jiminy Cricket character for Rapunzel, except he doesn't have a voice, except for squeaks and squawks that she understands.
I mean, he's a little bit more of, just like I said, just that cute animal sidekick, but it works. But then you have, like I said, you have Maximus, who's more of an actual full character.
Exactly. And then of course now they're connecting Tangled and Frozen together, saying that they're in the same universe and that they're all
more of an Easter egg kind of thing. But
yeah, I'm just like, whatever. But visually, and I think the visualness of this, especially when they get to the lanterns, looks beautiful. It looks gorgeous. Yeah. The story is very well done. I
loved what they did with the twist on Rapunzel, because Rapunzel's always been this person with long hair, and she lets her hair out, and they climb up.
I was about to
how do you make a movie out of that? But she's using it as a weapon. She's using it as a tool. It's like practically prehensile in some cases, where it's moving around.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's basically Sindel from Mortal Kombat 2. She can mess you up with this hair, and then of course by making it like magical and stuff because of a flower, so like. It can heal and stuff like that. So you add magical elements with the hair, except for just being a weird, crazy girl with long hair.
I will say, I thought she looked better with the short hair at the end.
She does look better with the short hair at the end. I 100% agree. I'm just like Flynn. Oh, I have a thing for brunettes. You didn't know that? But it's one of those things where, yes, it's a girl locked up in a tower with really, really long hair. How can you make this exciting? You add this magical element to it. You add a woman who's basically holding her captive, pretending to be her mother, and she's actually a princess. By adding all these elements that was not initially a part of the Rapunzel storyline, at least to my thought process. I don't really know the Rapunzel.
I don't know any more to the story than you do. So
yeah, I think all those elements added to this and made it stronger and made it better. It's no different than Star Wars with Han Solo and Princess Leia. Yeah, she's a princess, but she's actually a badass. And here's this scoundrel who is just kind of gets thrown into the mix of it, and then they fall in love, and boom, there you go. And that's basically what Tangled is with Rapunzel and Flynn, and it works, and it's great, and it's fun, and I'm shocked that it's been so long since I've seen the movie, because I was trying to remember when was the last time I saw this, and it may have been relatively right around the same time that it came out, if not maybe a few years ago, and I just forgot. But rewatching it, I was just it kind of felt like I was just in a warm blanket, just like enjoying, like, man, I like this movie. Kind of thing, instead of like having to overanalyze it and overthink of it. And that's what's so good about Tangled. And yeah, I agree. People want to say Frozen's the best Disney film in the 2000s. No, it's the best musical film for Disney, but it's not the best.
And it's still a very good movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. The soundtrack is better, 100%, but it is not the better film than Tangled. Tangled leaps and bounds, a better story, better cast, better characters. They're both good. You can like both. There's nothing wrong with liking both. Enjoy both. I'll enjoy the soundtrack for Frozen more, though. Obviously, Tangled's on Disney Plus. I mean, I mean, it's a Disney film. Of course, it's on Disney Plus. I'm more shocked that Mrs. Doubtfire is on Disney Plus, obviously. But now we're moving on to Brian's pick. This is a film from a franchise that I love, but I also only love like 2 of the movies from the franchise. So it's one of those things where it's like, I love this franchise, but I only really like 2 of the movies in the franchise. This is not one of those movies, though. But Brian really likes this movie, so we decided to talk about it. And we are talking about the 1997 film Alien Resurrection. Alien Resurrection came out November 26, 1997, had a budget of $75 million, had a weekend opening of $16.47 million. It was number 2 its opening weekend, and had a finished box office of $161.37 million, $47.39 million domestic, and $113.58 million international. Before we get too far into it, Aliens. I love the first 2 Aliens films. I think Alien 3 is forgettable. Then there's this one. And Prometheus is pretentious as hell. And I think Alien Covenant, when it's about the xenomorphs, is good. And when it's about Prometheus shit, it sucks. And then there's this film. So before I go into it, Brian, this is your film. So go ahead with Alien Resurrection.
All right. Well, first background on Aliens. The first Alien, I've always thought was good, but I'm one of those people that prefers the second Aliens. I think it's leaps and bounds better than the first one.
I prefer the second one over the first.
But it's also I think it's a thing of taste because they're 2 very different movies. That's one of the things I've actually liked about the Alien franchise is that they've done the thing where they've had a different director for every film until they got into Returning with Prometheus and that. But that's when it went off the rails, for my opinion. But for the first 4 films, essentially. I like that they had like a different feel to each one. It was like a different person's take on that universe, and that's something I thought that was cool to do. Aliens, like I said, my favorite. Alien 3, I like. I see it definitely have its flaws, but then even David Fincher didn't like the way that turned out because there's a lot of studio interference. When they got to Alien Resurrection, it's kind of weird because they went with a director named Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who basically had not done much in America. His biggest thing people knew was a foreign film called City of Lost Children, which I actually liked. It's got a lot of the same cast that he brought into this movie, but it's definitely a very weird kind of surreal, artsy kind of film. And so I'm not sure how they matched him with like this blockbuster sci-fi film, and you can kind of feel like that weird tone that it ends up having as a result. I mean, he went on to do Amelie and some other things, but this was basically his first like English American movie. I wouldn't even say, like Sean said, that I love this movie. I don't love this movie. But I do enjoy this movie, and I think it's unfairly trash. I think people just kind of criticize it as it's being complete junk, and I don't think so at all. I think there's definitely a lot to like about it. It has a couple of big drawbacks to it, which I will admit. But I mean, Sigourney Weaver, you have her back, and it's always nice having her in anything, but especially back in an Aliens movie. I do think that she kind of overplayed kind of that weirdness. She kept kind of like stroking people and moving her head weird and stuff because she's supposed to be like have essentially some alien DNA in her or whatever. I think that was overplayed a little bit. The rest of the cast I actually enjoyed very much. Winona Ryder, I've always liked in everything. I'm not sure if she was right for this role, but at least it was something different instead of just like another guy like Lance Henriksen or Ian Holm as the robot. The whole crew of the mercenary crew, whatever they were on there.
Betty.
I like everybody.
Brown Betty.
What's that? Oh, the Betty. Yeah,
Betty.
Right. Michael Wincott, who really only ever gets to play villains. I mean, we've seen him in everything from Three Musketeers to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, The Crow. He plays not really a villain here. I guess he's one of the good guys. I don't know how you.
I mean, he's the leader of the Betty, basically.
Yeah, him. You get Ron Perlman, Gary Dourdan, who people might know from CSI. There's a guy who worked a lot with Jean-Pierre Jeunet called Dominique Pignon, who looks like kind of if you took Thomas Jane and squished him down a little bit.
Thank you. The whole time watching it, I was like, why do I keep thinking this is Thomas Jane? I know it's
exactly like Thomas Jane. If you just like squish him a little bit.
Thomas Jane. Thank you so much. I thought I was the only person who thought that.
Oh no, absolutely does. Because it was distracting. Because there was about 20 minutes here, I'm like, he looks just like someone. And I'm like, yes. Thomas Jane.
Oh, thank
The
you so
facial
much.
expressions when he smiles,
I
especially.
didn't message you about this, so I'm so glad you said that because that was driving me nuts. Oh,
Um,
continue.
Leland Orser, who people might know as the guy in Seven, who was freaking out after he was in a sex shop, and but this is
That
a
doesn't
whole great
count.
supporting. Brad Dourif is in this, who we already talked about before with Child's Play. It's just a great supporting cast, top to bottom. So I have no problem with the cast. I think that actually the characters were really good. This was written by Joss Whedon, which you totally can get that feel with like the crew of the Betty. They definitely have that feeling of like kind of a Serenity or kind of some of his TV shows and things like that. That kind of that he does a group dynamic, even onto Avengers, where I think those characters work real well. But you can also see where the studio dictated a lot of certain things in the plot. And I think for the most part, from what I understand, and he did this a lot back then, was Joss Whedon basically took existing scripts where the studio had dictated this is the plot, and he mostly did dialogue, a few scenes, a few characters. He changed things like that. So I don't blame Joss Whedon for the things that are wrong with this movie. The other thing that I do admit I have a problem with is the newborn towards the end.
I'm definitely going to be getting into that. So
It looks ridiculous. It's like a kind of human skull, but it looks almost kind of pregnant. It's got this weird big belly, and it's kind of stupid looking, and it's kind of got this
grandma titties.
it's got the grandma titties, and it's kind of doing that whole mama thing with Ellen Ripley, and it's just very weird. The whole newborn thing did not work for me. So that's another thing I will admit doesn't work. But for the most part, the movie worked for me. It's got the same kind of claustrophobic feel because they're caught on this ship with these aliens that are running loose. I totally understand the use of the cloning storyline as a way to get Ellen Ripley back, because obviously they, killed her in the last one. So, but I think it was very smart. It's like, well, they want to get this alien, so what can they do? They can try and clone her, which she had the alien DNA in her, so it makes sense. So I like the plot points. The execution was not all perfect. I don't think the director maybe was the right choice for it, because like I said, a little too artsy. But for the most part, I enjoy this movie, and I think it just gets unfairly crapped on. And I've talked forever, so go ahead.
No, you're fine. It's your pick, so you're allowed. This is one of those when I started watching it the other night and I saw it written by Joss Whedon. I messaged him like, Josh Whedon did this? You're like, well, he did and he didn't. And I'm like, okay. And
Yeah, I think I talked about that was Speed. He did Toy Story. A lot of things that people don't even know he had something to do with, where basically he was largely a dialogue guy. So,
but then the movie came and I'm going, oh my God, this dialogue is cringy as fuck. It's bad. It's really bad. There are some lines in this film that are horrible. And part of me feels like what you said. It's not necessarily that the lines are horrible. It's the script that has been laid out and the dialogue that's been laid out. Josh Whedon tries to come in and he tries to, do his Josh Whedonisms, which we like, but in this script, it does not work.
it
There
doesn't
are
fit
so
the
many
story
lines.
in many points, and it definitely does not. Imagine if you had this director, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, this artsy dude, make the Avengers, but put Joss Whedon's dialogue in there. It does not work.
No, it doesn't work because there are so many times where there's dialogue set in this film. It's right there with sci-fi channel movie dialogue. It is like they say certain times like, really, you shot this and you thought that was the best line of delivery for that scene. Like that line of dialogue is the line of dialogue you decided to go with in this film. Are you kidding me? It is cringy. I don't know how many times they said a line. I was like, oh no, no, like real. That was the best you thought of at that moment. It's so bad. Now, in terms of the plot, the whole cloning thing, yes, I think that's actually really clever. Why they want to create the alien species? Because humans are stupid. That's why humans want to create shit. It's no different than Jurassic Park. Why
It's
are you
always
trying to
about
bring
it's
dinosaurs?
basically always about trying to weaponize it, essentially.
Exactly. Why are you trying to bring dinosaurs back? Well, because money and dinosaurs and weaponize them. Why are you trying to bring xenomorphs? Weaponize them. You can't control them. They thought they could with the whole thing that Brad Dourif does. But it's that part's not the part that bothers me. First off, Sigourney Weaver's performance, you touched on it a little bit. It's not good. She is not
I,
good.
I would go so far as to say she might be the weakest performance in the movie.
She is collecting a paycheck from like the beginning of the film when she's playing this like she doesn't act like she's a human. Like the whole dialogue with like when Winona Ryder breaks into her jail cell. Yes. And she's just like kind of like she's trying to act like a snake and just not all there. It is not until she sees the clones of herself that she starts to actually start acting like Ripley, Sigourney Weaver-esque kind of things. Because the whole time you're watching it was like, why does she care? She shouldn't care. Her character shouldn't care. Then you have the horrific basketball scene, which ranks right up there with Catwoman in terms of basketball scene. It's just bad. Ron Perlman's dialogue is bad, but it's Ron Perlman delivering it, so it's fine because it's Ron Perlman, and that's right up his alley. But there's just so many bad lines of dialogue. Sigourney Weaver's just kind of there. I agree. I like Winona Ryder. This was not the movie she should have been in. She's not horrible, but she was definitely miscast in this role.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The jumping the shark moment of this movie, because there is a jumping the shark moment of this movie, is literally the newborn. When this is the equivalent of Jurassic Park 3 when the Spinosaurus dominates the T-Rex in 1 minute and 8 seconds. To have this baby basically shoot up out of the womb, and then you have Brad Dourif narrating the whole thing, which just made the scene that much fucking cornier and bad. Yeah. And then you have it rip up through the womb, and then it just bitch slapped the queen's jaw off its face, which made it just look like that the queen was like cardboard. And I'm just like,
the queen who like they fought with like machine guns and stuff before, and it like barely put a dent in her. Yeah.
And here's this thing, it's done. It's like, no, fuck this movie. And
unless because this is a queen that is not the same original queen, it's mixed with human DNA, like it has a human reproductive system, so maybe it doesn't have the hard shell. I don't know.
I don't buy that for a second. But then you have this whole, like you described, where it literally looks like Sigourney Weaver wants to fuck the aliens at least 3 times in this film, where she's like caressing it, and it looks like she's about ready to fucking tongue the baby.
No, she's more like a mom.
No, you don't caress it like that. She looks like she's about ready to make out with the damn thing, with the thing with the grandma titties, just going. And then you sunk the eyes in to try to make it look sympathetic when Sigourney turns its back on it, like, no, I don't. This is the worst part of the fucking film. Let this thing die, and it has a gruesome death, but it's also just utterly ridiculous. But
yeah, I'm not gonna defend the newborn. That's usually that. Even when I watched the movie originally, I was like, this is the worst part of this movie.
No, if they had not had the newborn and it was just regular xenomorphs, I was like, I probably wouldn't hate this movie so much, because the whole sequence of them going through and having to deal with them in the water, which I thought that was Aliens 3 for some reason. That stuff all worked. All this, the actual xenomorph stuff works in this film. I think they are used very well. And I really liked everything they did with the group and the xenomorphs minus the dialogue. The actor, J.E. Freeman, who plays Dr. Wren, hands down one of the worst fucking performances I've seen in a movie in a very long time. That dude cannot deliver a line without smiling. Even when he's not talking, you can see him standing behind everyone going, like, why you're not Silent Bob. Stop smiling for no fucking reason. This guy is every line of dialogue he's in this movie is atrocious. Leland Orser, that dude just keeps popping up everywhere now. I feel like every movie we watch, he pops up in something. He's basically playing like the crazy lieutenant or sergeant from Starship Troopers, like, we're all gonna die kind of thing. But even then, he's got hands down probably one of the coolest fucking death scenes in the movie, where he brings the horrible
guy out with him. Yeah,
it's like that. I was like that. Okay, I was like, all right, that's pretty but I'm watching this movie and it's more frustrating because it's like there's a really good alien movie in here somewhere, but it is being bogged down by a horrible Sigourney Weaver performance, which should never happen in an Aliens film, to horrible dialogue, to this J.E. Freeman, who's basically the male villain of the film. Also, the part that bugged me was Gary Dordan, who plays Chris, where he just kills himself. It's like he just gives up and dies. It's like,
Well, because if he didn't, then he was going to kill the other guy was going to die
he
too.
wasn't immobile. He had acid on his face, his leg. He acts like his legs and arms were numb. They weren't. He could have gone on the ladder and saved Thomas Jane miniature and and been fine. But no, he just like cuts himself loose and dies. It's like, no, you could have kept surviving. Like nothing really.
Yeah, he's got acid burning through his skull. He doesn't know.
Just like, you could have survived that and been fine. Because I'm like, oh, he's gonna die because of that. But he's shooting and he's having conversations while hanging. And he's just like, I'm dead. Which even then he falls back into the water. That doesn't kill him. They just left his ass. Like that character made no sense to me. But it was just one of those things where the movie itself, I didn't like it. It's right there. It's probably the worst Alien movie because Alien 3 is forgettable, but I think as a whole, it's probably structured a little better. I think the storyline elements of Resurrection would be better if it wasn't for the baby.
I will say it is probably my least favorite of the original 4 Alien movies.
Yeah. But yeah, oh my God, it's not good. And as I was watching this, I was like, I think when I was younger, I mean, granted, we all hated the baby, but I think I didn't hate the movie. I just hated the baby. But then I'm watching it now and I'm like, oh, there's so much wrong with this film. There's so much wrong with this film. And to the point where it's like, I lowered my rating after rewatching this. Like, I think I gave it like 3 stars. It dropped down to like a 2.5 because I was like, oh my God, this movie's worse than I thought it was. Like, I remember being like, actually like, it's fine. And watching going, oh God, this is not good. Like I said, there's a good movie there somewhere, but you got to cut so much off of it. It's like having a nice juicy steak, but it's all grizzle. And by the time you cut all the grizzle off, there's like this much left. And you're just like, cool.
Well, and one thing that bothered me is that the ending of the movie had promise. It's like, okay, we're finally bringing aliens to Earth. They're going to come to Earth. There could be another one stowed away or something. You could finally get to see where it can go from here, aliens on Earth. But then they waste that by the next thing they do is Aliens versus Predator, which has aliens on Earth, but it's like takes place in present day instead of this future. So you're like, okay, so you just wasted that opportunity.
I mean, that's always been the problem with Alien and Predator is that you have the ability to put something really, really good together, and then they just go and fuck it up.
Yeah.
And it's just like, guys, this isn't rocket science. This is not rocket science making a good Alien movie or making a good Predator movie.
Just look at Aliens, okay?
Yeah, look at Aliens, Predator 1. Or Predators. We talked about that. We liked Predators. But
and though I admit its flaws, I enjoyed The Predator.
The Predator is not good. It is not a good movie as much as you want to, because it's Shane Black. It doesn't make it a good movie.
With full size Thomas Jane.
Yes, with full size Thomas. That cast with Shane Black and that cast, The Predator should have been good. It is not a good movie. I don't understand how they have such a hard fucking time trying to put a good Alien movie together or a good Predator movie. I don't.
Well, because anytime they have an opportunity to make a good one, like they were going to do that one that's basically going to, like a lot of franchises do, they're going to retcon it, and it was going to have Michael Biehn was going to be in it again. They're going to do one, basically it was 1, 2, and then this new one.
Yeah.
And of course they canceled that because Ridley Scott wanted to make Prometheus and Covenant, which is
pretentious garbage.
Yeah.
It's just it's not hard, guys. It's not. It's really not. Stop overthinking it and just get right. Like then they're getting ready to do a new Predator movie that takes place like 300 years in the past. Here's hoping that it's not shit, but it's going to Paramount Plus. That tells me right there it's probably not going to be that good.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything else on Alien Resurrection?
No, nothing else on that.
Okay. And that's
like I said, I'm not pretending it's a great movie. It's my least favorite of the 4, but I think it has things to like about it and just get shit on a lot. So I wanted to make you watch it.
And it has the jumping the shark moment of the baby with the grandma titties.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's on Peacock, right? Peacock.
No, that one's on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV.
I thought one of the movies was on Peacock. Never mind. It's an all Prime episode. It's an all Prime and Disney Plus episode apparently. Except
most of next week's on Peacock.
Exactly. So that's our episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Weekend Crusaders. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Out now, we have Black Friday. I was gonna do a review for it. I just had decided that
actual Black Friday is making him too tired to bother.
Exactly. So I'm probably not gonna shoot a review for it. But Brian has not seen it yet. I'm just gonna say this right now. Black Friday, for what it is a very solid horror film based around Black Friday. Could they have hit the Black Friday-ness of it a little bit better? Yes. the retail aspect of it and how it drains your soul and all that kind of stuff, I think that stuff does really well. I think the cast, Devon Sawa, Bruce Campbell, blanking on the girl, Ivana something, I'm blanking on her last name. I think all of them do a solid job. Ryan Lee, who's the ugly kid from Goosebumps, finally grew into his looks a little bit, so good for you, kid. I think it's a solid, average horror film. It's on digital right now, on demand. So if you guys want to check that out, go right ahead. I would recommend it for people who are looking for something a little different for Black Friday. But it's not going to be one of the best films of the year by any means, but it's a solid horror film. Plus, you got Bruce Campbell. Who's not going to love a Bruce Campbell horror film? Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. I have not seen it, but Brian has. Brian, your thoughts on Resident Evil Raccoon City?
Not great. It's I mean, the original ones I don't think are all that great, but at least they have a style to them. This one's just
Yeah, I hated all the old old. They're not old. I hated all the Resident Evil movies. I had high hopes for this, but Brian's kind of made me rethink seeing it, even though I was real excited for this. Bruised, I have not seen, but Brian has seen it. Brian, Bruised.
Bruised it's not a bad movie. It's more of a family drama about this woman, and she finds out she has this son. MMA is almost secondary in this movie. It's a decent movie. It's a solid directorial debut for Halle Berry. So I gave it like 3 out of 5 stars.
8-Bit Christmas came out. I have not got to see that yet. Brian has. Brian, 8-Bit Christmas.
I think I described it as it really, really wants to be an updated Christmas story by way of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but it's a Christmas story, and it's barely on par with Wimpy Kid movies. It's just, I wanted to like it a lot, but it was just kind of
And the other 2 movies came out this week. Neither one of us have seen yet, which is Encanto and House of Gucci. Neither one of, even though we talk how much we like the Disney animated films, Brian and I neither really are in a real rush to see Encanto, and I am in no rush to see House of Gucci, and I don't think Brian really is either. So whenever I watch those or we watch those, maybe we'll have a review for them. We'll probably have a review for at least Encanto. House of Gucci, maybe not. But yeah, we haven't watched those yet. Also, I know we don't really talk about TV, but Hawkeye dropped. We both watched both episodes of Hawkeye. I really enjoyed it. I love Haley Steinfeld. I think her and Jimmy Renner's dynamics together and their charisma together works incredibly well. Not a whole lot's happening so far in the first 2 episodes, but I dig it, and I'm excited to see what the last 4 episodes are going to bring. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I'm not blown away by it. But I really did like the 2 leads so far. Brian, what were your thoughts of Hawkeye?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, so far, I just love the tone of it, and so far, I think it has a potential to be my favorite of the
because it's so much like a Shane Black film, and that is why you like it.
It absolutely feels like Shane Black.
It's like totally a Shane. It's like I know Brian's bread and butter. It is like a Shane Black film, so naturally Brian's gonna love it. Hawkeyes every Wednesday for I think the next 4 weeks. Maybe we'll do something at the end of it. It depends on how we're feeling. Because it's Marvel. Who knows? Coming out next, there's only one movie that comes out next week, but I don't even think it's going to be out in theaters, and that is Silent Night. I saw the trailer. It's intriguing, but not intriguing for me to go out of my way to see it. Maybe if I hear good word of mouth, which I think right now it's fresh on Rotten. Maybe I'll check it out at some point, but I'm not going to rush to check it out. Other than that, that's it for next week. But we will be back next week for another episode of the Weekend Crusaders. We will talk about 5 more movies that came out during that weekend in movie history. We have a drama that I think is quietly underrated that probably not a lot of people have seen or talked about with 3 great leads. We have a sci-fi cult classic that I have never seen that Brian does not like. And I'm not expecting to like it either, so we'll check that out.
To the point where I actually asked, is this our stinker for this week? But no.
And it's not our stinker, it's the revisited. We have a Christmas horror film that I have not seen, which is shocking because I think I love the cast for this movie. Brian has seen it, and he is in favor of it.
And you like the director of it, too.
What's that?
And you like the director of it, too.
And I like the director, too. We have a action drama that is one of my favorite films from this actor that we're going to talk about. And then we have a remake of Epic Shit Proportions that we're going to go back and go, was it really that bad when it came out? I think the answer is probably going to be yes, but we're going to check it out to see if maybe we feel like it's maybe being wrongfully shit on, like Brian thinks was Alien Resurrection, or if it's being rightfully shit on, and we will find out.
Like Sean says Alien Resurrection is.
Like I said, Alien Resurrection, exactly. But yes, we'll be back next week. We are the Weekend Crusaders. My name is Sean Wasserkrug. That is Brian Michaels. And until next time, in case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders, and have a happy Thanksgiving and be safe on Black Friday.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.